your you carry your own sense of who you are and what can be achieved in given who you are in that place, and how I'm afraid I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying. Just give me a minute, please. Can someone just type? Because I can't exactly make out what is being said. Can someone please just send me a typed message? I'm not very sure. I can't make out exactly what is being said on the mic. Okay, I'll try joining from a different device because this device volume is already on the maximum. So I'll try joining from a different device. Hello, is this any clearer? Can someone clarify that? Is this better?
Yes, ma'am, much better.
Okay, thank you. Yes, to continue where I was talking about, I have been trying to struggle with this notion of place, how we are shaped by place, how place affects us, and how we in turn affect the place in which we come from. Initially, it was right at the start of my career as a journalist. I was very interested in why particular cities have particular reputations. So, for example, with the Chambal, I was interested in the association with banditry and what we call dakati in Hindi. That why this particular place? Why not any other town? And my writing was an attempt to answer that question. But later, when I sat down to write my own memoir, when I was writing Bread, Cement, Cactus, what I was trying to achieve there was something else. I was trying to think of how and where I belong. So I start right at the start of this book. I start with this quote that actually comes from Marquez, but I didn't even realize that it comes from Marquez. I had gone to a festival and they were selling some Urdu posters there. And in Urdu script and in Roman script, it said there कि जहाँ कोई अपना दफ्न नहीं होता, वो जगह अपनी नहीं हुआ करती. And I was very struck by that. So I bought that poster, I brought it home, and I was thinking about that. But there was a picture of Marquez on it, and I kept thinking, I have read Marquez. Where does the sentence come? So I went back to look at 100 Years of Solitude, and ultimately I found that sentence. But for me, that was very interesting that when I read the book in English, even though I am a writer in English and I read and write mainly in English, I am most fluent in English. But when I read that sentence in English, it did not have the same impact on me as when it was translated into Urdu and I heard it and read it, the impact on me was completely different. My response to it, emotional response to it, was very different because it was not just a matter of the land where it says, no, कि जहाँ कोई अपना दफ नहीं होता, वो जगह अपनी नहीं होती. Now that jaga, whether you say that place or whether you say country or whether you say anything else in any language, it means the same thing. But when you say it in Hindi or Urdu, the emotional impact on me is different because it comes to me in a language of belonging where I already identify with it as mine and which is associated with my memories, my childhood memories. So I thought a lot about this. And then I started the book with this quote. But the book is not really about language. One language comprises one of the chapters in this book. The book is about where you can and cannot belong and how. So, for example, I grew up in Rajasthan. It was a very small place, much smaller than even the town you are in. It was an industrial township. So, there was a factory there and there was almost nothing else. People must have lived there before. But the people who used to live there before were no longer allowed to live there. Because when somebody builds an industrial township, there is a lot of displacement. Um, whether they were, in our case, there were Adivasis who used to live there, the Gracia tribe and the Bhil tribe, they were displaced. Um, and I'm sure that is the case in every state, wherever you build something new, steel factory or anywhere else, whenever something new comes up, somebody else has to move to make place for that. And then what happens to those people? So I was interested partly because the place I grew up, the the tribes were around. They were in the villages, but we had almost zero interaction with them. We only saw them if they were required to come in as laborers to build a new building or to clean or something. Otherwise, there was no attempt. They were not even allowed to study in the same school because the school was private. It wasn't a public school. So I grew up there. I lived there 15 years, 16 years without really forming any kind of friendship or stable relationship with anyone that was not of the township. And the paradox was that the people who were of the township actually did not belong to that place at all. And they had no intention of staying. They could not stay. You could not buy land in that township. The land was owned by the industrialist or by the government, but the government has given it to the industrialists. So effectively, what did we have? We had each other in a very temporary way, where it was understood that you can live here as long as you have a job. If you do not have a job in any capacity in the township, effectively you were dependent on the employers or the managers or the industrialists to determine your place in that location. That land, the resources that came with it, the mountains, there was a lot of blasting in the mountains. They used to use dynamite to extract limestone from the hills. That was effectively controlled by the industrialists and the needs of industry. We, as people who lived there, were there in a, um, you could say, utilitarian way. As a child, my presence there was accidental. My mother was employed at the school there. So, okay, she was there as an employee. She was required there for her services. And we were allowed to stay there. The people who used to live there were not allowed to stay there. They were not even allowed to come in to the premises without permission. And we had no interaction with them. As a child, I did not question this very much. I was curious about them because, okay, they're a different tribe, they look different, dress in different ways. We don't know their language, they don't know our language. But it was a very um, imbalanced sort of relationship because the power was completely on the side of the industrialists. It is not that I, as a child, had any power in this equation. But at the same time, there was a certain otherization of the Adivasis. Even though it was their original homeland, they have always lived in these hills for I don't know how many generations. But there was that sense of they need permission to come and go, and that they are, in a sense, outsiders in this place. When I grew up, I began to wonder about that. As a child, I didn't, but when I grew up, I did begin to think about this, that what does it mean? What does it mean for someone to be displaced from somewhere? Maybe they just moved to the next village. Maybe they just moved like 50 kilometers away. But what does it mean for those families to look at this place, this factory, this township, to people like me who come in from outside, um, and to be made to feel like an outsider? And what does it also do to them? Because a township, an industry is supposed to bring development, right? We talk about development all the time. As a journalist, this is one of the things that bothered me a lot because I wrote a lot about displacement. And every time I go to a place, whether they're building a dam, or they're building a road, or they're building a nuclear power plant, or they're just setting up a new factory for something, the whole discourse around this is it is for the good of the people, it is for the good of the country. And if you bring in a new place, the place develops. But what is the meaning of development? Um, that question we don't like to answer, or we don't like it when people if whoever is on the call can please mute themselves, that would be useful. Um, thank you. I have wondered a lot of times and questioned sometimes bureaucrats or people who are factory managers. In my adult life as a journalist, I have questioned them and asked, what does it mean? What is this development? And I still remember the answer one bureaucrat gave me. He said, he said, development means that a man who did not have 500 rupees in his pocket today has 500 rupees in his pocket. That was very simple. For him, it was about money. But for the Adivasis and for people who have deep roots in the land, they have a very different view on this. And they have challenged this view in very clear, articulate, and beautiful terms, actually. For example, when the Narmada Bachao Andolan was at its zenith, and there were a lot of people talking to the government, trying to fight and resist the height of the dam. One of the things they said, a letter was written by people who lived on the land, and he said that you are displacing us. You said, okay, you will give us land somewhere else, but what can you really give us? You say you will give some money, maybe. How long will that money last? And that is a very valid question. Today, if you remove me from my home and you give me some money, I will run out of money very quickly, right? I will need to find a new house. I will need to take care of my daily needs. If I have children, I need to secure their future. And I no longer have the social connections that will help me along the way. Social connections cannot be quantified, but in a country, especially a country like ours, especially like in India, social connections are almost everything. They determine how you will get ahead in life, whether or not you can find a job, whether or not you can, if your house needs repairs, who will come to help you? If your farm needs an extra pair of hands, who will come and help you? When you break apart a community, all of that is lost, right? If you go into the city, you don't know a single person, you will suffer. But if you know two other people, you will suffer a little less. If you know 10 other people, you will suffer even lesser. These are the rules that of society, social rules, and social terms of engagement that we cannot quantify and which nobody takes into consideration when they displace people. So that was something I was very interested in. And so as an adult, I went back. I went back to this place where I grew up to try and understand it. And this time I did talk to the people who were displaced. And I conducted some interviews with them and I tried to understand their relationship. And there was a lot of resentment. Maybe not violent resistance of any kind, but there was resentment about a development that does not take them into account, a development that does not really think of their future, that only thinks of its own future. Because finally, in the ways that we intervene, what is the difference between a colony and an actual process of investment or people coming in to settle on a land? One of the big differences during the colonial era, for example, was that the British who came, they did not stay. The difference between an invader and somebody who just comes to your country is that when somebody comes, they come and stay and they invest and they learn and they give what they can give to the land. And that you can argue actually does develop in some way. It develops your culture, it develops technology perhaps because they bring their own knowledge with them. But when you have a colonial or extractive relationship to people and to the land, you only come looking for money. You come to take what you can and you interfere with their systems which were upholding them. And that was one thing that I kept thinking about and which I continue to think about. This is the big difference in approach, and it can make a huge difference in approach to how we approach our own people. When we talk of development, what is our model? Is it a model that is actually helping everyone and helping everyone in the place where they are, not trying to move people around as if they were pieces on a chessboard, trying to win at something, win at a power game, or win at the financial stakes so that you benefit from how you are making them move? That is not a very healthy model, in my opinion. And these are some of the things I've been trying to write about, whether it is in my journalism or whether it is in books like Bread, Cement, Cactus. Further, I've also tried, the book is called Bread, Cement, Cactus because bread is, roti. You go wherever your bread will take you, right? Tomorrow, if you get a job in Delhi, you have to go there. If you get a job in Nepal, you have to go there. If you get a job, if you don't get a job anywhere, then sometimes you have to travel in the hope of getting a job somewhere else. So we go where bread takes us. That was one thing. It doesn't have a lot to do with the identity. So, for example, if I was to move to China tomorrow, I don't in any way identify with the culture. I don't really have a choice in this matter. I don't really have any connection even in terms of intellectual knowledge. I don't have a connection with that place. But if I had to go there for work, well, then I would go there, I suppose. That is what everybody does, right? At the same time, the people who live in that place sometimes resent you. So I did move to Bombay. And when I moved to Bombay, there was a lot of what we call the Sons of the Soil movement there. There was a lot of emphasis on Marathi, and there was a lot of anti migrant sentiment, especially from North India. They did not want Hindi speaking people there. Now, Bombay as a city has always been a migrant city. It used to be just a small fishing village, just a few hundred years ago. It doesn't have a lot of deep history. It was set up as a shipping port, it was set up as a place of administration. And there were lots of industries there, and people came from all over the country. They came from Gujarat. A lot of them came from Gujarat. A lot of them came from the north. Some came from Hyderabad. Some came from South India. Lots of people came. Now, at this point, from the 60s onwards and right up until the early 2000s, there was some anti migrant sentiment. Initially, it was directed at South Indians, and at that time, they were all called madrasis. But there was resentment because they were taking jobs. And when I moved, by the time I moved around 1999 to Bombay. Within 5 years, there was a lot of anti Hindi sentiment. And this is also something that I think about and which I'm thinking about even now, because um, what is my place then? It is still my country. I've not left the country. But in moving from UP to Rajasthan, I find I cannot belong because I'm not allowed to belong to this place. I can't buy property there. I'm not allowed to live there because that place is controlled by industrialists. So the place where you grow up is not your place. Then, okay, I moved to Bombay. Um, you can buy property there, but you are not really, by a lot of people, you are seen as an outsider, as somebody who does not really belong. And if you want to belong, then there are conditions here. And one of the conditions is language. And so slowly, I moved towards language as a place of belonging. In my book, I talk about this. I talk a little bit about my grandfather's history also. He was an Urdu writer, but we were not taught Urdu when we were little. And as an adult, the expectation was that I should learn Marathi because I lived in Maharashtra. And perhaps that is not a bad thing to learn it, but it is never a good thing if it's being thrust at you with the threat of violence. That is not a healthy state of affairs. So I was sitting there thinking about what is my place in the world? Where do I belong? Will I ever be able to belong somewhere? And these are questions to which I don't have any answers. I have written the book, but even now I cannot claim that I have an obvious answer to these questions. Because even if I was to move back to UP, and I ultimately did buy a house there and I did try and live in UP for a short time. But the thing is that sometimes even the place in which you have family roots, and my family has very deep roots in UP. In my ancestral village, we have been there for at least 14, 15 generations. But we don't live in the village, right? We live in the biggest towns now. And in the biggest towns, also, I find that the place itself is changing. The politics is changing. Sometimes, even if you do speak the language and you do have property and you have been living there for generations and generations, but sometimes the environment around you changes. And even there, you find that you find yourself unwelcome. Sometimes it can be on the grounds of language, sometimes it can be region, sometimes it can be skin color, but sometimes it is religion or caste or whatever makes you feel unsafe, you will try to avoid. But how can you avoid it if you actually belong to that place? So these are some of the things that I was trying to address in Bread Cement Cactus. Those of you who want to read it, please read it. It is available in India by Cambridge University Press. It is also available as a free download from the Cambridge University Press UK website. The book is a free download there. So if you are curious about my work or about the kind of things that I've been talking about, please read it. The other book I'd like to talk about is my latest. It's called The Comeback. The Comeback is a novel. It is also about place, but it is a light-hearted look at place. Most of my work tends to be a little bit heavy. Sometimes it is about belonging, about identity, about grief. I wrote a book called City of Incident, which is about Bombay, but it is a lot about struggle and grief and um, different characters struggling for different reasons in a very big city. But in the comeback, I wanted to write something that was fun and I wanted to write something that would cheer me up. So I wrote something which is a little bit light. It is the story of two men who are best friends. One of them is John Kay. He goes to Bombay and he becomes an actor, but he has grown up in a place called Masa in UP. And the other friend, his best friend, is called Asghar Abbas. He is a banker and he lives in Lucknow. And but he used to work in theater. He's the one who actually gave John Kay a grounding in theater, worked with him in college, made him an actor. And the two friends have a falling out. If you read the book, you'll understand why they had a falling out. The result of it is that Asghar loses his job. And he is now suddenly at this situation where nobody's hiring him. He has a family to support. He doesn't know what to do. And so he goes back to Basa and he goes back to college to get another degree. And when he goes back, he decides that actually I'm going to stay. I'm not going to move to a bigger city. I'm not going to run away. In a sense, he comes back and he decides that life has thrown him a very, very major challenge and he takes it up and he decides to set up a theater in Masa, a theater company. And the whole novel is about making theater in small towns versus trying to make it as an actor in a bigger town. There are compromises involved. John Kay is quite a selfish, has turned into a kind of selfish person, but there is still in him the spark of ambition and also not just ambition for himself, he also wants his friend back. So he also really has this passionate desire to heal this friendship, to recover his friendship and recover as in redeem himself in some way. So the novel is about these two forces. It is about trying to set up something new in a small town, and it is about trying to find your place, finding your feet. What is my place in Bombay? When a guy from a small town moves to a place like Bombay, he might even find some small success. That is a possibility, and everybody goes there with the hope of finding success. But once they get there is a lot of struggle, and the struggle will change you in some way. It can make you tougher, it can make you harder, it can make you more selfish, or it can make you more resilient, it can make you softer, kinder towards other people, more embracing of other people's struggles. And you have to choose between being this or being that. And sometimes it might make more sense to just come back home because home you have some security. Home you have your own family. Home you have a sense that, okay, maybe there is not a job here, but maybe I can create jobs here. Maybe I can be the person that will transform this city. And that is also a very big ambition. So that's what the novel is about. And between these two men, there are various women who are either supporting them or not supporting them or fighting with them. And they all play a role together in bringing theater to Basa and making Basa not only the recipient of theater, but the creator of theater, changing, becoming internationally famous. And it is, well, like I said, a light-hearted book. It is not a very serious novel, but at the same time, it is trying to address this issue of place again, finding your place, finding your feet, fighting for your place, fighting for your desire, whatever passion you have, whatever dreams you gave up because they were thought you thought they were impractical, or you thought that, who's going to help me do this? How will I ever have a family and support a family? Art is a very difficult decision for many of us when we choose to be writers or we choose to be actors. It's a very big decision because you know that maybe you will actually not be able to support a family on this kind of income. Or you know you might have to work at three jobs at the same time in order to make this one thing possible. At the same time, the rewards are great in the sense that you know that something might come of it which makes life worth living, which gives you a sense of community, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of giving back to society in some way. So those are some of my own impulses which I have put in the book. Not I'm not an actor, but as a writer, perhaps. And my own struggle with place also comes out in that way. You can try and build an institution, But do you have to build it only in big cities? Or if you're trying to build it in big cities, also, how are you building it? What kind of art are you producing and for whom? Who is your audience? Are you writing for the West? Are you writing for the elites in India? Are you writing only for English speaking people? What kind of books are you writing? What kind of plays are you making? What kind of movies are you making? Those are some of the questions that I've tried to address in The Comeback. And I hope you will go out and read that one too. It's a very new book. Um, I think I will stop here. I've been going on for a very long time. Perhaps if there are any questions, I'm very happy to take them. Or if someone else would like to respond to anything that I have said, I'm very happy to just listen as well. And thank you, all of those who've been sending up little hearts.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an amazing. I'm certainly very happy with Thank you again, ma'am. We truly appreciate this conversation. The session is now open for questions. If anybody has a question, they can come up on stage and ask.
Could you please repeat that?
So I think the session is now open for questions. If anybody has a question, they can come up on stage and ask. Am I audible?
You are audible, but there's a kind of echo, so I can't hear very clearly. If you can, if someone can, if someone can just type in the question, perhaps that would be easier.
Now you can clarify the question.
Um, Sorry, what is the question? Sorry. You are audible, but like I said, there's a kind of hollow echo on top of your voice, so I'm not able to understand what you're saying.
Is it clear now?
Better, yes, better.
The session is now open for questions. So if anybody has a question, they may come up on stage and ask. One by one, everyone will come and they will ask the question. Is it
Okay.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Mm.
What advice would you like to give to our young writers, especially those trying to publish in multiple genres?
Okay, thank you for that. Um, I'm guessing all of you are students, probably BA, maybe MA students. The first advice I would give you is get a career, find a job. Um, People often have slightly, when I was your age, I also had slightly romantic ideas about writing. Um, the thing is that writing as practice is very different from writing as career. I have had a career as a journalist, and that is actually one reason I write across multiple genres. It has been helpful to me in some ways. Because I write for a living, I've been working as a journalist for many years before I um, quit full time work and started to freelance. And then I started to teach. So, most writers, if you actually look at their lives, you will find that they do something else. And this is very important, not only because of having being able to support yourself, that is a separate issue, but also because it gives you some experience of life. If you just sit at home, um, your experience of life is very limited. You can only write about the home. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it does limit your worldview and it limits the way you understand the world. Even to understand what is going on in the house, it helps if you have a different perspective or a slightly larger perspective. So I would suggest that any kind of job at all, you should try and get that if you can. And writing usually has to happen in your free time, whenever you get some time. The second thing I would urge you to consider is try to write for yourself first. Don't write for the world. Of course, we all hope that everyone will read us. I hope that people will read me, whether you're a student or whether you're in some other capacity, whether you're a scientist or whether you're a horticulturist, I don't care. I would be very happy if everyone read my work. But I don't write for people. And I don't even write for people necessarily in terms of region, except when it comes to journalism. When I write for journalism in a magazine or in a website, then I have an audience in mind. And usually it is an audience which is the people, and sometimes it is the powers that be. The powers that be, as in, you obviously writing with the hope that something can improve, that something can change. If I'm writing about, say, the lack of footpaths in my city, I do want people to talk about it, for people who can take decisions to notice that. So, journalism as a career is very focused on outcome as well, positive impact. And hopefully, some of you will also explore that option. If I'm writing in academia, if I'm writing a paper, then again, I have some audience in mind that, okay, um, students will be reading me or professors will be reading me. And I need to my analysis in a way that they will be able to build on an argument or understand this argument in a particular way. But otherwise, if you're writing fiction or poetry, I mean, the world is your audience. It doesn't make sense to try and impress anyone. It doesn't make sense to try and fit yourself into any kind of groove to suit other people. Experiment as wildly as you like, but understand that mostly you are your own first reader and you have to write in a way that works for you, most importantly. That would be my main advice.
It was an enriching session, ma'am. Listening to you. Thank you so much for that. Very good. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My
Good
question is,
afternoon.
my question is, which authors or works have most influenced your voice and vision as a writer?
um, so when it comes to influence, you are influenced in different ways. One is a very direct kind of influence. So, for example, I remember when I first read P. Sainath's Everybody Loves a Good Rot, um, I was uh, startled by it because it was showing me a part of my own country which I did not know existed. I had lived in small towns, in big towns, but I did not know of this part of the country, India's poorest districts. And for me, that was like an awakening. And it shaped a lot of the work I did in journalism. Um, but there are many other writers which influence you in a very quiet way. They change your worldview. So when I was small, I used to read a lot of Charles Dickens. And at that time, I did not feel like this is influencing me in any way. But Charles Dickens did have a particular way of looking at the world. He talked a lot about class, not always in a direct way, but the lives of the poor, the lives of those who are struggling, the compromises you have to make when you're struggling in life. He wrote a lot about that. And he wrote about, so for example, in A Christmas Carol, he writes about miserliness and what it does to the person who is a miser. In Nicholas Nickleby, he writes about a different kind of situation. In Oliver Twist, a different situation, kids who are living on the street, etc. And now, when I look back at my childhood and the kind of books I was reading, I think I was influenced at a social level in terms of how I learned to look at society, how I learned to look at my own society when I grew up. So that was a strong influence. Also, I like the work of several feminist writers. I like Margaret Atwood a lot in terms of style, and I think, I mean, I don't know whether I can count her amongst my influences, but certainly, uh, I aspire to be able to write like that. And there are many other writers whose style I really like. Um, I like Doris Lessing's work a lot. I write amongst the newer writers. Um, I like the work of Isabella Hamad, for instance, who wrote Enter Ghost, very new book. I think influence doesn't stop for you. It continues all your life if you keep reading seriously. So these books also do influence me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, I want to ask you, as you belong from a background that English and literature, your mother used to write poetry, your grandparents get the Padma Shri. So, is this literature come naturally to you, or you make it for such a purpose?
My mother did not. My grandfather did. My uh, my nana, he was a poet. Uh, my mother did not write, but um, I do think that it did not come naturally to me. But I do think that um, it makes the difference being able to come from a literary background. So, for example, the house in which I grew up when I was little, like when I was very small, maybe 2 or 3 years old, the house was always full of books. The gifts that we were given as children were always books, whether it was a birthday gift or we are traveling somewhere in a train. Um, we've always given books as birthday gifts, and everything else was secondary. Clothes also okay, but the main thing was book. And the thing that I wanted more book. So I think that makes a difference. The kind of upbringing you've had. And for us, it was literature was not something that we went looking for outside the house. It was all around us. And maybe to that extent, it did come naturally.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for patiently answering all the questions. Now, I would like to invite Neha Peters to deliver the vote of thanks and conclude this. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Karim City College, I feel truly honored to deliver the vote of thanks for today's enriching session of Writers Beyond Distance. First and foremost, a heartfelt gratitude goes to our esteemed guest, Annie Zaidi ma'am. Your presence has truly elevated this gathering, and your words, thoughtful bold, and honest have stood it all. Thank you for sharing not just your work, but your passion, your challenges, and your wisdom. You have shown us you have shown us distance, be it physical, emotional, or social, can be bridged with empathy, imagination, and courage. It's a lesson we will carry forward both in our academic lives and beyond. I would also like to thank our head of department, SN Yahya Ibrahim sir, faculty members, faculty members, and the organizing committee for their constant support and encouragement. And last but not least, thank you to each one of you in the audience. Your presence, your questions, and your curiosity made this session vibrant and meaningful. As we close this session of Writers Beyond Distance, maybe we have heard today continue to echo in our minds and inspire our own writing journey. Once again, thank you, ma'am, and thank you, ma'am, for being a part of this session and making it truly memorable. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, it will become the end of this session. Thank you again, ma'am.